Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris, Lance Albertson, and Monica. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there everybody, DMO73 here, welcoming you back after a long week of Force of Will to the Teacher's Lounge, your Force of Will podcast featuring as always myself and Ryan Miles.
Hey-ho!
Brandan Bremont.
Hi, hi.
Frank Klosser.
Oh, hey.
And this past weekend, we had some interesting events, kind of countrywide with ARG States. We're going to be touching base a little bit about how those went for us and kind of what we took away from it. We're also going to be talking about the new Worlds info for the World Championships coming in September. And then a topic of Brandon's choosing here, bringing up the idea of mulligans in terms of thought processes behind it, kind of maybe what to think about in going into it, how to use your mulligan to your advantage the best in competitive play. But before we jump into any of that, we need to talk about the poll from last week. So last week's poll was, if you could bring a card from another game into Force of Will, what would you put in? And the winner is, drumroll, Brandon.
Oh. I beat Exodia?
Surprisingly enough, with 11 votes.
Nice.
Brandon from Naturalized from Hearthstone beating out Exodia by maybe having nearly triple the votes that Exodia had. Not even close, far and away.
Wow.
So congratulations, Brandon.
People play Hearthstone.
I was gonna say maybe I just picked like the most popular game and therefore I got it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Congratulations.
It also wasn't fair that
Invisible
like I was
Crown.
listening to the episode from last week and Jeremy didn't actually make a choice. Like he didn't. I didn't even notice that until afterward. But
I sat out, and then Paul actually made a decision for me. He added Anjak the Alkin from Kaijudo, and he said they answered what Jeremy should have said. So Paul chose for me, and then only
Thanks,
got one
Paul.
vote, which I can only imagine was Paul voting for it. So there you go. So yeah, let's talk about states. So we know that myself, I played. Ryan, I know you played.
Yep.
Brandon, I know you played. Frank,
Yep.
you did not, but you went to locals instead. So how did your states events go? Let's start with you, Ryan.
So we had the states where we all decided not to play Sherry. You know, when we got there were two people that were going to play Sherry, and then we low-key bullied them into not playing Sherry. They had other decks on them. They were like, all right, no Sherry, no Sherry. It was a good time. So round one, I played against my brother's like weird Scarlet Dinosaur control
What did
deck.
you play?
I played
Hate to interrupt.
the Lumia deck that I played at the ARG, the Resuscitating Will Rachel combo, where you just flip
Okay.
your ruler for like 1 mana because your stone's untapped. Then you attack, flicker Rachel, get Resuscitating Will, attack, flicker Rachel, get Resuscitating Will, and have a good time with that. So my round one was against my brother, and he plays Jeanne d'Arc, and that's terrifying for a deck that wants to have an imperishable J-Ruler. But I actually managed to take it 2-1. I won against 1-3, and that was cool, and I called this deck bad. And then round two, I played against one of the people who we bullied off of Scheherazade, and it turns out the second deck he had with him was Red Green Fair, and I honestly wish he had just played Scheherazade. Like,
Sorry to pause. You said he played Joan d'Arc. Do you mean the red white 4-drop?
no,
the
sorry,
black
the
one.
black.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mad Maiden.
My brother played that in his Scarlet list. But yeah, my round two was Red Green Fair, and I lost game one because he flipped his ruler, and I lost game two because he goes turn one Spirit Caller, and then use Spirit Caller to play Sacred Elf, and I severing that because I don't want him ramping. But he was on the draw, so he turned two Mary Bellid anyway, and then he turned three Mary Bellid, and I was like, okay, I lose.
Well, I guess that's the end of that game. Yeah.
Yep. And then round three, I played against one of my friends who was playing Rhea, and he was also playing Jeanne d'Arc, and that was kind of the story of the matchup. He got to hit my ruler with a Jeanne d'Arc, and then we didn't get to finish game two because, like, I didn't scoop game one because I had, like, resonators I could use to beat him in, and he was running out of cards, but I should have scooped. Topic from last week, right? And then, yeah, round four, I played
Learning
against Keurig, and I
lessons.
won, but I was already X2, so it didn't matter. So, yeah, the moral of the story is, like, I think without Scheherazade in the format, like, J-Ruler decks are actually pretty popular because there's Red Green Fair, there's like generic Fair decks, there's Lumia, there's Ayu, Scarlet, and that just makes Jeanne d'Arc a really good card. So
There you go.
It's a very interesting look into what the format might become if we do see Scheherazade banned.
Okay. Brandon?
So I actually didn't know this until Ryan just said that, but as it turns out, I played the Lumia OTK combo deck at my states too. And I didn't know that that we both played the same deck. The deck is just tier 3 garbage dumpster fire. Deck is actually just atrociously unplayable. But nobody showed up to my locals playing Sherry either. We didn't have an agreement or anything, nor did we bully anyone off it. But just everyone decided to show up not playing it for some reason. So Jalen Rojas showed up playing the green-white like fair combo recover thing and just dumpstered me in the finals. But I went undefeated other than that.
Nice. I played
again. He just like flipped fair, and I could never win.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It feels like one of my freest matchups. I beat that twice at ARG States, or the ARG in Connecticut.
There was absolutely no beating it.
Ah, you're crazy.
You're crazy.
I played Time Spinning Witch, as I had talked about before, blue-green, but I was playing Disciples, Lord 7 Disciples, and Misty Dragon Spirit for the middle ground, other than, you know, still having the lockdown stuff with, like, the dinos. We had 14 players at mine, and 2 of them were playing Scheherazade. I played against Sherry round 1, and won that match 2-0. I know it's my buddy, and I kind of know how he plays the deck a little bit, and sticking a Misty against his style of the deck and the way kind of he plays it, sticking a Misty Dragon Spirit super early was like just really hard for him to deal with. And then it was like, well, here's 9 in the air, you know, making your final battles worse and worse each time I connect. So that played out well for me. And then, you know, like getting the lockout is always nice. Round 2, I played against a Scarlet list. That was played at Collinsville that we showed on stream. It was like, you know, has a lot of dinos to like pitch to burn stuff.
Yeah.
And that was a matter of, well, I'm just not going to play cards, and then you're not going to play cards, and I am at advantage when you don't play cards. So it just gave me more and more time to set up these like protected outs. Game 2, though, I made the mistake. He put me on the play game 2, which I was kind of like, okay, that seems a little weird. But then I realized he could do turn 1 Ray. And I didn't have an answer for it, and then it flipped into 0, and I was like, yeah, I just can't win here. So
just play
scoop,
Misty.
and I scoop, and I will go to game 3, and I will take the draw, so that won't ever happen again. So I weirdly took the draw for that one, and then I ended up taking it on game 3. Round 3, I played against Gil. Not really a Gil Rangers list, which we've seen with like Leaf Paladin to like get a bunch of elementals and stuff, and then curving out into the green-black Gil. It still used the green-black Gil, but just not nearly as many elementals. Game 1, he just couldn't find a green-black Gil, so I just had a lot of pressure. Game 2, he stuck 2 green-black Gils back-to-back, so I was like, well, that's not good. And then game 3, surprisingly enough, my Violas that I was playing gave me what I needed to pinch out the last 2 damage on turn 2 of turns. So I ended up winning that one 2-1. And then I drew, intentionally drew round 4, which would have been a Time Spinning Witch mirror because I was already set to be first seed. And then I proceeded to get my face handed to me on a silver platter by Ayu in top 8. Like, my entire top 8 match took all of maybe 7 minutes. It was just like, well, yep, I am dead now, so have a good time. But all in all, I had a really good time, and it was great to see so many. We had only Time Spinning Witch and Sherry were our only decks that were repeated. Everyone else was playing a completely different ruler, so that's pretty cool. 11 different rulers in 14 players, so I had a good time.
Yeah.
All right.
And then Frank, you went to locals.
Yep. I took a list I'll be writing about and posting an article about later this week, so I'm not going to say much other than it did help me find not the ruler I want to play at Denver and Gen Con, but I found the shell I want to build a deck around. So now I just have to find the ruler I like best with that shell.
Do you know when Gen Con is off the top of your head?
It's
August
the first week
3rd.
of August.
Oh,
Like
is
August,
it? Oh,
I
so
think
it's
August
actually
1st through
before.
the end of the week.
So it's the same weekend as like Charlie's tournament, the weekend before Denver.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, like, in all likelihood, I will be playing the same deck 2 weekends in a row. It'll be great.
Nice.
So,
Same.
Am I the only one that feels like with all of these different results that like people are just dying to have an excuse to not play Scheherazade?
Is
it
this
feels
our
like-
weekly We Hate Scheherazade and Want It Banned segment? It's
Yeah,
quite
we have to
illegal,
get
but
it
we
in
can-
there, right? Like,
All right, yeah, let's do it. Let's get it out of the way early.
like my states, we just like outright said, okay, we're not going to play it. Jeremy, you said there was only 2 Sherries. Brandon, you said there was 0 Sherries, and you guys didn't even make the agreement. Like, people just are so sick and tired of this goddamn ruler.
Oh, 100%.
Can we please?
I think everyone, you know, it's like, it goes in 2 directions, right? Like, people are tired of seeing it so they don't want to play it, and they also feel bad playing it because they understand so much that everyone else doesn't want them to play it. So it's like, it's
community soft ban. Doesn't
Right,
actually
exactly.
get banned. Entire community just shames everyone into not playing it.
there you go.
That'd be interesting to see. That being said, what are you guys playing at Nats if it doesn't get banned?
Probably Sherry.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Prize
money
in
on
the
the line.
Yeah, well, it's
There's money
different
on
when
the
there's
line,
like
it's
actual
okay.
prizes on the line. You're not going to shame someone
Yeah.
into not playing a deck when there's money, but
I'll still
for
shame
sure.
myself, but I'll just.
oh yeah, you'll feel internal guilt, but then
will.
the money will
You'll
will
cry
soften
into
that.
your pile of money. It's okay.
There you go. Perfect. We also have that 5K coming up with Svetlana.
Oh
That'll
yeah,
be
that's
interesting.
that's
Game
after
like
plan.
Worlds,
Worlds,
though.
right?
Yeah.
Is
Like
it?
5
That'll be
months
even.
away,
yeah.
yeah.
That'll be fun to see what comes out of that once we actually see what the rest of the cluster looks like.
We'll have rotation. by then.
Speaking of worlds,
Hey.
before we jump into the next topic, let us know how you guys states went. Do you guys experience the same thing where everyone just decided to not play Scheherazade, or did you have a bunch of people who are like being tryhards and actually playing Sherry?
Well, I
Let
think
us
we
know
can
in the
like
comment section down
creatively
below.
answer that. Right? We've seen like
Let's
a
at
lot
least
of the.
not call them some derogatory nickname for playing the known best deck. Like,
Oh no, of course not.
I'm
the
not
fact
saying-
that everyone else wants to play something else does not mean that they somehow sinned for playing Sherry.
You're correct. I apologize. Thank you for the call out.
I
Did you
don't-
choose to
Um,
play Scheherazade, or did you choose to play something different? Let us
So
know.
looking
in
at
the
a lot
comment
of the
section
like
down below.
ruler breakdowns on the US page, it seems like that is consistent across the country. Like there have been many of the ruler lists that have been posted for their states have not had very many Sherries.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And this is why you can't anti-meta in America. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
not
To go
wrong.
back to last
We
week.
have an overarching
exactly what we were
plotline for
saying.
our podcast now.
Confirmation.
So going into the next topic of worlds, over the span of the last week, we were presented with the official kind of format and details for worlds. Worlds will be happening on the 22nd and 23rd of September of this year. It will be happening, as always, at the Maple Inn Makuhari, which is I like that venue. It's been
Oh,
nice
yeah.
to go there It'll be nice to go back.
Okay.
Day 1 is the main tournament, with day 2 being the top 8 playoff and the side event. Main event tournament format for the whole thing is going to be block, which means it's going to be New Valhalla 0, the structure decks, because we need rulers, and New Valhalla 1.
Do we,
So the
though?
I think we
We
call it,
probably
everyone just uses the draft rulers. Let's go.
Do we,
Um,
though?
So
Perfect.
interestingly to note that this will be the date of this actually lines up with the pre-release of Valhalla 1. So while everyone else is playing their pre-release for New Valhalla, everyone who's going to Worlds is going to be playing block with everything accessible from Valhalla 1 and Valhalla 0. So I'm interested to see kind of how that overlaps, or see just how the experience is. I'm pretty excited about it. I won't be playing. I'll be there probably, as far as I know. Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about that, but I'm doing it anyway. I'll be helping run it, I think. But it'll be interesting. Even if I'm not, I'm excited to see kind of what comes out of Worlds. All of you have Worlds invites. So what do you guys think of that?
Well, this was my #1 choice for the format. I am so excited for block. It's the format is going to be fresh and new. It's going to be lots of relevant testing beforehand. It's going to be a slightly lower power level format, which typically increases deck diversity a little bit. And so it's going to be great fun.
Yeah, Worlds 2016 was one of my favorite tournaments of all time. Not just because it was my first Worlds, but it was just like a really fun format. There was a lot of, I think, like pretty viable decks that you had to worry about. And then like when you were playing the best deck against like the other like top level decks, it was just like a fun game to play. And I got a lot of testing in for it. It's probably the most prepared I've ever been for a tournament. And I just really think that block format gives you the opportunity to showcase a lot of player skill, both in the fact that it's a completely brand new format, so there's no net decking. Like every single person, like the best players in the world, have to build decks from scratch and do their own internal testing. And then on top of that, it's just like a lower power level format, so like in-game decisions matter a lot more. Just absolutely one of my favorite formats. I think one of the best decisions for Worlds, and I do think that it does favor the American regions. I think that Europe has a handful of pretty good deck builders, but last time we had a block format Worlds, we did extremely well. Really dialed in on the best deck where the rest of Europe didn't, and then even the year before that, with Adam Reiser, should have won the event. So I think America is pretty well positioned for a block format Worlds too. So I'm happy about that.
Nice.
Awesome. And yeah, Frank, this is your first. So what do you think?
Oh boy.
I am quite happy. This was my second choice for format for Worlds, but I'm very excited. My first choice would have been still a split format with block format as one of the options, and literally could not make me sad with any second choice, although my first choice would probably be split between block with still a 3-round limited in the middle of day 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I love the fact that day 2 is a different format, so we get to play the new Frontiers on day 2. Like, I'm also
that's gonna be
excited to play in the
interesting.
bingo format at the end of day 2. No one's told me what is involved in playing in bingo format.
It's
literally
not
bingo.
It's literally just we're gonna play bingo, Frank.
We did
for
this
prizes.
in 2016 too, and it was actually the best part of Worlds.
Yeah. They just have a bunch of artists there, like the whole day. You can get your stuff signed, and at the end, they just have some of their art, and they're just like, okay, we got banners and artwork,
art panels and banners and hoodies and all
extra
kinds of
world
crazy stuff.
sets, stuff like
Do
that.
they tell us in advance which artists will be there? 'Cause I need
Nope.
to know how
They
much I
didn't
need to
last
pack
year.
up.
Yeah,
They
I'm not
didn't
sure.
even come up. There weren't any artists there last year.
No, I mean, sorry, they
which was
didn't the year
unfortunate.
before last year.
On
Yeah.
on day 0, the Friday, there's like
A player party.
Yeah, there's a player party, but before that, there's like an artist meeting time. So there's like registration, and like the artists are going to be there for you to sign stuff like even before the tournament starts. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that'll be really awesome. So it sounds like we are going to get artists again this year, which is great. Because if Wednesday is there, I need him to make me a playmat. Wednesday is the artist who does everything else.
No.
for
The
this
tournament's
game.
on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Jeremy. I don't know if you read the schedule.
Whatever.
It's okay that no one laughed at my bad joke. That's fine.
I get it. Wednesday, the day of the week. It's
Know
funny.
that laughter is not the correct response to a dad joke.
Yeah, and I'm the dad of this group.
Sighs.
I don't. If I didn't laugh, it's
I
just
know
not.
it's just
I-
yeah. All right.
so bad.
Let's just-
Um,
next topic, please.
I am interested to see what the new Frontier side event kind of looks like, because that'll be New Valhalla plus Rhea Cluster. So like that automatically with that side event is going to be pretty interesting too, because not only is it, hey, you guys just finished your pre-release, but also, hey, the best players in the world are literally going to be sitting down with Rhea, like what our new Frontiers format walking out of Worlds is going to be like. So we'll have to see what kind of comes out of that. I think that'll be interesting too.
If tradition has anything to go into this, I will be in the finals of that event as the best side event player in the world. But I'm
Best day
hoping
2
the top
player in the
worlds.
world.
I'm the best loser in the entire world. Come at me.
There you go. So yeah, I'm very interested to see kind of what happens. Let us know what you guys think. If you think that is going to be a fun format, what you're kind of excited about. I, for one, am excited to just kind of get more news, as well as just to learn more about kind of all the different things that is going to be given to the top players. I think that'll be really interesting to see. And as you guys have talked about before, I know that myself, Ryan, and Brandon can speak to this, and so Frank, you get to join in this next with this year. I think it's very awesome that in the Worlds format, my experiences has been that while there's kind of a little bit of like internal country, like kind of some keeping secrets from each other, right? Because everyone wants to win. I also really like the fact that at the end of the day, you're not Outer Worlds, you're not Team ARG, you're not on Tilt, like you're Team USA. So like we all very encouraging of each other and motivating, and I think that's just always really awesome
Oh,
to see.
of
So I'm
course.
excited to see that again.
I mean, you
in
hear
this-
that
with
we're-
all the new players who have received invites this year who haven't been in the past.
We always talk about like the number of U.S. players in top 8, and so it's like that's really the competition, right? Is which country's going to put most players in top, and so
Right? Yeah.
it's going to be us.
So that'll be interesting to see. I just want to see what Brandon and I were talking about this earlier. I just want to see what runes are.
Same.
I just want to see what the runes are specifically. But there's not really much to say more about that, so I kind of want to dump into our main like learning topic, I guess, for today. And Brandon, you had kind of brought this up before about this idea of mulligans, right? It's a very interesting
It's an idea,
part
all right.
of what?
It's an idea, all right.
Yeah, it is an idea. It's the thought process, the maybe some strategies or things to just consider when doing mulligans, or having to take as much information as possible before you commit to a mulligan to kind of help it be as beneficial as possible. So kind of to kick us off, Brandon, why don't you kind of lead us in with your thoughts on the matter?
So in the grand scheme of things, we haven't done that many episodes of this podcast yet, but I wanted to get this one in kind of as a level up topic really early, because I think that this is one of the areas that a lot of players could stand to get a lot of extra ground on their win percentage that they don't know about. Like, a lot of players will tell you, like, I'm bad at board math, I'm bad at knowing when to use removal spells, or that they can identify that they get nervous at certain stages, but very rarely do you hear players say that I draw my 5 and I just have no idea what to mulligan. Well, what's crazy is that I think that there is a huge amount of value in that phase that gets just absolutely thrown away. So imagine, if you will, at the beginning of the game, every card in your hand has 0, discard this card, draw a card. Or, like, send it to the bottom of your deck, I guess. That is a huge and powerful ability that, if it was actually printed on a card, would, like, automatically make it, like, game-breakingly playable. And so every card in your hand has this ability at first. You can trade any single one of them for a random card off the top of your deck. And to not do that when you should is to throw away a lot of value. So, like, if you have a 5-card opening hand and you throw away 2 cards when the more correct mulligan would have been 3, then you're seeing 1 fewer relevant card for the rest of the game. So, like, this impacts the rest of the entire match, just this one decision you failed to make at the very beginning. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit, like, back up a little bit and bring it into a limited example, because limited tends to play as a simplified version of Force Will, like Draft and Sealed, where you're making decisions on a more micro scale rather than the macro scale of Constructed. In limited, I had a deck, a draft deck that I played at locals. It was 2 Time Spinning Witch, 2 Ominous Moon. And the deck was pretty decent. The 24 out of the 25 cards in the deck would have made the deck about like a 6 out of 10 4-star, 3.5-star deck. But the 25th card was the green-black Gil Lapis, which was my pack 1 pick 1 out of Ominous Moon. So if anyone's played this format, the green-black Gil Lapis is nigh unbeatable in the format. It's extremely good. It's one of the best bombs in the set. And so when I played that draft, literally every single game I played that I did not draw Gil in my opening hand, I mulled all 5 cards and drew the next 5 cards in my deck. Because in aggregate, the average power level difference between any 5-card hand and a random 5-card hand is much smaller than the delta between that hand and a hand with Gil Lapis in it. And so getting myself 5 cards closer to Gil Lapis is always more powerful than however well I could have sculpted the hand otherwise. And this is a limited example. This is a very narrow, precise example where one of the cards in your deck is significantly better than the rest of them. And that doesn't typically happen in Constructed, although it does sometimes with like the Gil Alhamet Cheshire Cat combo deck that was the best deck in format after Echoes of the New World. And that deck also just mulliganed 100% of the cards for Cheshire Cat's assistance because it was so far and away the best card in the deck. And you don't typically get that extreme, but you do get a lot closer to that extreme than I think people give it credit for. I see a lot of the time people keep a full 5-card opening hand when they draw, like with Scheherazade. And I think that in the Scheherazade, especially the mirror, keeping 5 cards is like next to never correct, because there's only a very select few cards that matter in that matchup, and most of the other ones are interchangeable, whereas the counter spells are significantly higher power than basically most of the rest of the other deck. So like it's typically correct to mulligan a lot of the not counterspell, not dollmaker cards. And all of this is a long-winded way of saying that there is a lot of value in taking a time before sitting down for a tournament, drawing opening hands, and really putting some thought into what am I mulliganing for? What is powerful here? Is sculpting a curve more powerful than getting me myself X cards closer to the cards that matter in my deck? When the opponent reveals their ruler, what am I looking for? What cards matter against them? What cards are going to get value against them? And really taking some time to think about that more than I think that a lot of players give due diligence towards.
Yeah, I can speak to that process of like gold fishing, right? Which is kind of what you're talking about, of like sitting down and just drawing the opening 5. I used to do that when I played Yu-Gi-Oh! I used to do that when I played Kaijudo, although Kaijudo was almost nigh impossible to do gold fishing with because of the fact that your deck became your shields. So it was like, well, I have to shuffle, set 5 random cards face down, and then draw 5. And that makes it weird. And there was no mulligan in that game. So for those kind of games, it's kind of like the catfishing becomes, what do you do with this opener, right? So then the question became, like, how many times out of 10 did your deck in your opening 5 give you a playable hand? So I think that with the mulligan that we have now, it really does add this kind of complex layer to the idea of gold fishing, where you have to say, like, like you're saying, you have to make the distinction between, do I build for a curve, do I sculpt for trying to make sure that I dig for a specific power card for this matchup, knowing that that's what I kind of need to win. And I think that I've seen less than I thought I would see of players doing that when we changed mulligans, ruler reveals, to before mulligans. Like, so it used to be, so not that I saw a lot of it before we changed that rule. Like, I didn't really see a lot of it beforehand, but like in my mind, when they announced that rule, I was like, oh man, I immediately, with this idea of we get to see our opponent's ruler before I draw my 5 cards to look at what I might mulligan. In my mind, I'm like, snap, I'm going to be practicing like crazy from here on out, like doing mulligan determination based on what my opponent's ruler is. Because before, it kind of became this guessing game, right? Where I think in the old times beforehand, it kind of was like, there's not nearly as much power card identification necessarily, and it was more focused on like making sure you could actually play your deck with the hand that you were given, right? So like building for that curve. But I think now there is very much more decision making as a part of it, and I don't see players doing that very often, as much practice wise as much as they could. And I agree. I think that is a real play space where you can improve your win percentage by practicing just that portion of a game based on what your opponent reveals.
No, for sure.
Going back to one of the points that Brandon made, I think like one of the, like, your win percent shoots up not exponentially, but like incredibly when you find this card as examples like the Carrick deck. So I know a lot of Carrick players like to keep cards like Sylvia or cards like Piggy in their opener, and I'm hard pressed to find any card I want in my opening 5 that isn't just Ground and Air Supremacy. And because like you get to mull 5 cards and then you get the added bonus of turn 1 dig 5 cards, like mulliganing as many cards as possible to try and find Ground and Air Supremacy just seems like the best thing to be doing every single time, just because of the added fact that you're not just going 10 cards in your deck, you're going 15 cards in your deck. So every card you mulligan gets you, like, you're like, it's so hard to not actually find a single copy of Ground and Air Supremacy if you mull 5 and then use your ruler ability. And because it is just like the most powerful thing you can do on turn 1 almost in every matchup except for Scheherazade, I think, where the better turn 1's probably Howell Pig. It's something that you really just want to mulligan every card, like even Fair Spell, even Severing, just like stuff like that.
Well, and also, it's a good example of digging towards like your power card, but it's also a good example of it's important to keep in your mind like the ratios in your deck. Like you know the entire contents of your deck, and for that deck, it is running 10 2-drops. Yeah. Literally 1 in 4 cards you will see is a 2-drop. And the difference between their 2-drops is not so big that you need the Sylvia on turn 2 versus Piggy versus hard-casting Ellie. And so keeping something that you are almost guaranteed to draw backups of if you heavily mulligan, while not digging for something that is like far less likely but far more impactful, is just not keeping your own deck in mind.
Don't they play 4 Piggy, 4 Sylvia, 4 Pele Isn't that 12?
I've seen a decent number of lists that are only 2 Sylvias.
Oh, okay,
yeah. Only 2 Sylvias? I love
that. Seems silly to me, but I'm not a Carrick deck builder. Another thing I want to talk about was just like not mulliganing.
I guess the 2 Sylvia lists I saw were the ones that went a little bit bigger and had the 3-drop Pig.
Gotcha.
So there's that.
Another thing is just like not mulliganing cards that you have like 4 of in your deck and you don't necessarily need multiples. Like I think This might be inaccurate, but I think people keep Severing Winds too much, and I end up mulliganing it in a lot of matchups that aren't specifically Scheherazade. So against Keurig, against like Scarlet this weekend, against IU especially. Not really against Lumia so much. I'm just trying to think of decks that aren't Scheherazade, and I'm drawing a blank here, but like, Severing's not going to be a live card until like turn 3 at the earliest most of the time. So if you see a Severing in your opening 5, I think it's okay to get rid of one, because there's only so many Severing Winds that are going to be live throughout the course of the game, and because you're not likely to cast the card until turn 3, I think if you have more proactive things you need to be doing on turn 1 and turn 2, like, it's just better to have to dig a card deeper. And that's like one of the things that I see people keep every time, no matter what, and it's just, I don't think that's correct. I ship it a lot. Again, this is specifically in like non-Scheherazade matchups, so I kind of want to ask your guys' thoughts on that. Do you agree?
So what you're alluding to is very important to the Mulligan process, and that's this concept of matchup speed. So like how much getting things on the board quickly matters. Going back to my draft deck example, because that draft format is so slow and you're basically not even punished for not making a play before turn 3, like having a curve just doesn't matter at all. What you're talking about, you don't mulligan Severing Winds in the Scheherazade mirror. Part of that is because that matchup is so grindy and attrition based and card advantage based that it's going to go late enough that you're not going to get punished for not having a turn 1 or 2 play as hard, especially since Scheherazade always has a turn 1 play in Approaching the Truth anyway. So in the Scheherazade mirror, you'd keep it, but you wouldn't in matchups like the Lumia, where part of the way that you're going to beat Scheherazade is by getting on the board faster than her, putting her out of final battle range, putting her out of that advantage. And so, and that's a part of thinking about each individual matchup. When we made the switch to flipping rulers before mulligans, I think it added an extremely depthful layer of decision making to the mulligan system, because you can look at what they're playing and think about how fast is this going to be, how important is it that I get on the board quickly, and if it's not important, then I can keep the things that will have a deeper impact later in the game.
Out of curiosity, and this is obviously going to be self-reported and based on your memory, but when we made that rules change, did you notice a significant shift in how many cards you mulliganed? Because I did.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. I started again because my focus, my decision tree became two-sided. I was taking input from two sides of the board at that point rather than just my own side of the board, in the fact that beforehand my focus was purely on how do I make it so that I can actually play my deck, right? That was what my mulligan was. It was like making sure I have a good curve, with like once the curve is established, that it was like, okay, what kind of utility cards do I maybe want to keep? So I was consistently maybe mulliganing 1 to 2 cards. Now I find myself kind of consistently mulliganing, 2 to 4 cards, because I'm able to sculpt my deck based on having an entire new point of information that, like Brandon can say, it immediately helps me see what the pace of my game is most likely going to be like, what cards in my opening hand might be completely dead draws that I maybe would save in an unknown situation because I maybe was playing them for the sake of what I expected the meta to be, but now I can go, oh yeah, this is a completely dead card against this matchup, so I don't have to worry about saving it now, so I can ship it away. So having that extra layer of information, I think, definitely has increased my average in terms of cards that I'll ship away.
I think another thing I'd want to talk about here is just there are a lot of, like, when you build a deck, there's a lot of thought that goes into like how many of a card you run, and typically if you want to see a card every turn 1, you'll play 4 of it. But just because you play 4 of a card doesn't necessarily mean you want to see 2 copies or 3 copies, for example. Some examples of this would be Sacred Elf and Lumia. Like, the Sacred Elf turn 1's great, but then, like, you don't need another one on turn 2 in most situations. You don't need, like, Sacred Elf, Melfi, because then you're just actively losing the game. Another example is just Ground on Air Supremacy in Keurig. So, like, going back to what I said earlier, it's really important that you're mulling 5 to find your Ground on Air Supremacy. But if you already have a Ground on Air Supremacy in your opening 5, I think you can actually mulligan a lot less aggressively, to the point where you're keeping your 2 drops and you're looking for like a turn 2 and even a turn 3, and that's when you will keep Fair Spell Severing in your hand to protect your board. And that's because, like, you don't really want to actually find additional copies of Ground on Air. Like, a second one's not bad, but the third one gets significantly weaker. So I think that, like, based on the cards that you have in your hand is really going to shape also how many cards you're mulliganing. Just if you already have your best turn 1, then suddenly you're saying then, okay, like, am I really looking for my best turn 2, or am I looking to, like, just play with what I have and then see how my turns are going to go out? And the other example, like Sacred Elf and Lumia, or, you know, Gem Mallet Panda, I would pretty much mulligan away any additional copies of Mana Dorks except for, like, the turn 1 that I had. So I'm thinking, like, if I have, like, Sacred Elf, Gem Mallet Panda, and Melfi in my opener, I'm mulliganing I'm keeping the Gem Mallet Panda, I'm mulliganing Sacred Elf and Melfi, because I'm probably going to draw more copies of those cards anyway, because I am just going to, like, you know, draw a bunch of cards as the turns go on, and I don't really want to already have 2 and then draw a third. So I think that's an important decision. The same thing kind of applies to the Severing argument I was saying earlier. Like, yeah, I still want to find a Severing Winds, but if I keep a Severing Winds against Keurig and then I draw another one, like, I really don't need 2 Severing Winds against Keurig. It's just not something that I'm probably going to cast before the game is over, and I do need to be more proactive.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But
so what about you guys? Have you guys seen the numbers of cards that you've been mulliganing?
It's not really something I keep track of. Like, it so heavily depends on the deck, right? When did this change happen? Does anyone remember, like, the set?
I think it was at Masters, or no, National. I think it was ARG.
It would have been around Masters last year.
Like E&W, I think, is when the change happened.
Right. Yeah, I think right around E&W is when it happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, my mulligans were so based on the deck that I was playing that I don't think it, like, really mattered. Like, I feel like I mulligan a lot more than the average player. That's completely anecdotal, and I don't actually have any data to support that. But it feels like whenever I'm playing in a GP, I mulligan 3, 4, 5 cards a lot, and I see an awful lot of players look at their 5 and keep it. And I just don't really have any numbers, but I really wish I could get, like, a team of players who have mulligans that I really trust, and we could just take, like, the 3 best decks in format and run, like, 100 hands on them and see how often you actually keep all 5, and, like, how often that's actually correct. I would say that, like, with especially Scheherazade, but then, like, also Lumia, also Time Spinning Witch, like, these are all decks that I feel like I mulligan 3 to 5 cards consistently, and I struggle to imagine how good your hand must be to not mulligan at least one of the 5, especially with those 3 decks, and yet I see it all the time. And so,
yeah.
So we may not have empirical data, but we do have a large body of, like, experience data we can compare this to, because this problem is pretty similar to anyone who's ever watched Legacy. Watch someone play the card Ponder, because for anyone who's not aware, it lets you look at the top 3, and you have the option of put them back in any order or shuffle, and then you draw a card. And it is probably about 80 to 90% of Ponders I've seen resolve on coverage are shuffles. And that is with the ability to stack the deck, and that's in a game where they have forced shuffles, so they can, say, draw 1 card, then forcibly shuffle their deck for no downside. And they still shuffle away for more that often, because when your deck gets efficient, and, like, Force of Will may not, like, especially New Frontiers, may not be quite, like, Legacy consistent, but it's very consistent. You have a lot, like, seeing more cards, it can just be more powerful than even keeping a known decent card.
Right.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people in Grand Prix against me keep 5, and at that moment, like, you can hear from across the room how hard I shit my pants sometimes, and then I feel like half the time I actually do get butt blasted by, like, a character deck that kept 5 and just curved out, and, you know, when Cthulhu played it in the Wanderer tournament. But I've also seen people, like, keep 5, and then, like, they have an okay turn 1, and then an okay turn 2, and then they have, like, Fair Spell Severing Wind, and that was their, like, 5 keep, and then it's just, like, there were more efficient things they could have been doing, and people will just, like, 5 keep okay hands instead of, like, trying to make it better for fear of making it worse. And I feel like that's just not correct. I think that your win percentage is going to go up if you are aggressively looking for better openers, and then, like, I'm also going to be mulliganing cards, so you can assume that my hand will be average just because that's the middle of, you know, good and bad. Like, on average, my hand will be average, so I think you should be aggressively looking for better hands.
It is
your hand will, on average,
of the
be average.
Partial Paris mulligan we've got, that you can almost always get better.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So mulligan more, listener.
Yeah, that's
There
kind
you
of
go. That's the lesson.
Also,
don't be afraid to
since
mulligan more.
Since I was the one who asked, and I said I had anecdotal numbers, my answer was that I increased my mulligans by about 1.5 cards.
That's
Oh wow, it's a very specific observation.
I think if I increase my mulligan by 1.5 cards, I'd be mulliganing 5.5 cards.
Exactly.
Okay, so I jump through decks a lot,
Yeah.
just because I naturally brew a whole lot and I enjoy like writing and stuff. So for good parts of the year, I'm playing a new deck every week, and you simply can't play enough regular games to get a decent feel for a deck. So the first thing I'll do is like, okay, finish sleeving it up, and I'll spend an hour goldfishing a deck to get a feel for how it goes. And so that what over half that time is, or maybe closer to a third of that time, because some deck, like if it's not a control deck, I will play out a decent number of turns just to see what happens, but at least a third of that time, if not half that time, is just mulligans and opening hands.
Mm-hmm. That's like my GP prep in a nutshell, because I end up traveling for a lot of GPs. So in the car or like in the airport, I'll just pull up my deck and just start goldfishing because I have nothing better to do. So it's
on a
just,
plane,
like, a good way to get
I do that on
feel
planes all the time.
Exactly.
I'll just like put the little
Yeah, I
like
do
tray
the same
down on the
thing.
play, put the tray down on the play, pull the deck out, play against the back of the seat a few times.
And people are like,
Have
"What
you
are
ever
you
lost?
playing? Or what are you doing?"
Oh yeah,
Have you
I've
ever
lost
lost
to
to the
plane
back of the
seats.
Hold up.
Oh yeah, many
I
times.
have
Plane
actually
seats
had
are so
one
good.
time where not only did someone not ask what I was doing, they asked why Force of Will was taking me to California, and I was so happy. And then I was sad because they weren't playing the GP.
Aw.
They were just going home.
Let's go ahead and commenting on something. This comment is a little bit late, but Ryan a second ago said that when he plays against an opponent at GP and they keep 5, he shits his pants. I'm actually the opposite. Whenever an opponent of mine like keeps all 5, I actually like immediately think they don't know what they're doing, and it like makes me feel better. So like it's always a good sign for me. Maybe I'm just like ceaselessly optimistic, and I always find reasons to think I'm gonna win. But
I'm slowly coming to that opinion, but when I'm in like Minneapolis and then Alex Blandon keeps 5 and then just goes like
yeah, oh
fire
sure.
severing,
If
evil genie,
if it's
it
someone
feels
I
nice.
know isn't awful and they keep 5, then yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. But if it's like someone I've never heard of and they just like open their hand, flip their Charlotte ruler, and say keep 5, I'm like,
That's
alright.
probably fine.
Yeah.
That's because their decks with 36 regalia. Mulliganing no number of cards changes that.
Well, the 36 Regalia deck was like had like a 5-card mulligan every time.
I'm just looking for Black Moonbeam
No,
every time.
Right, exactly.
I was being facetious.
Oh goodness. So, yeah, I think that the kind of takeaways to point that, like we said, is definitely, if you haven't already considering it, or you aren't already doing it, spend more time goldfishing your mulligans.
I had one more thing to
Thinking
say.
about
if
like-
I,
Go ahead,
I was
Ryan.
I
thinking
have
about
infinite
it.
things to say.
So I really
What do you
think
do?
that
Set out a ruler that you're goldfishing against. Like
Yes,
you
absolutely.
do 3 to 4 goldfishes against a ruler, then switch it up, because that's how you're mulliganing now.
I think that Glint of Insight is slowly shaping the way that I mulligan, because I'm more inclined to ship away popular
Duplicates?
4-ofs, because especially duplicates, but also like cards I play 4 of, because it's reasonable that I will see an additional copy. Like I don't want to keep like my Severing Wind and then like draw another Severing Wind and they go Glint of Insight, call Severing Wind, and I'm just like, oh, that's kind of annoying. And I saw a lot of Glint of Insight at the tournament this weekend because I did play against Scarlet and Rhea, and I think it's becoming popular in Scheherazade too, so I think this will lead over to New Frontiers, but like that card's pretty scary, and like there are very specific things that you blind Glint, and it is like Fair Spell Severing Winds, and like against Scheherazade you keep those cards anyway, but it's giving
I
me
would
pause,
expand
I guess
that a
I
little
want to
bit,
say.
because the blind glint is something particularly interesting.
Yeah.
Your experience is probably they're calling a lot of Fair Spell Severing Winds because you're the Sherry deck, and so you are naturally mulliganing towards lots of counter spells to interact because you already have card advantage, and also those are simply the most potent things that deck does.
Yeah.
But aside from people like blind naming Severing Winds because it's just a safe play, what they're often going to name is whatever card in your deck most scares them.
And
So
you
can I
can't
share a
mulligan that
fun story
away,
about
so
that?
It's hard.
Correct.
Can I
that's
share
the
a fun
problem.
story about that?
Feel free.
So I was playing on Untapped the other day, and I was playing Time Spinning Witch, and he does Thought Control, and I have like Lorite and a couple other spells and a Lorite 7 Disciples in hand, and he does the Lorite 7. He takes the Lorite 7 Disciples. And I'm like, that kind of is unfortunate, but I have other play lines, so it's fine. So then later on, in the like 2 turns later, I have a second Lorite in hand, so I have 2, and I've got all this open will, and I completely forgot that I don't have a Lorite 7 Disciples in my hand. So I flash in a Lorite at the end of the turn to do nothing. So then I'm like drawn to my turn, and I'm like, oh sweet, now I'm gonna play my Disciples. And I look at my hand, and I'm like, I don't have a Disciples in my hand.
What am I doing?
But here's the funny thing: the next turn he plays Glint, and I've got a Severing in hand. He plays Glint, and he calls Disciples, and I'm like, I definitely don't have one. And he's like,
You're just getting that 1 damage Lorite beat in.
Yeah.
Well, I also just lock him out for the turn because I have a Severing in hand, and he just cast Glint and whiffed it. So I was like, sweet.
I actually exactly lethaled my brother in game 3 with a Lorite this weekend. That felt really good.
But I was just like, unintentionally, I didn't realize what I had in my hand. I made this stupid play, and it ended up working out great.
That's the counter to good plays. Stupid plays that don't make any sense because I'm like, what is going on? Whoa. But I guess like
It's poker logic.
It used to be like if I saw 3 Severing in my opening hand, I'd be like, oh, we're about to have a good time. But now I'm like, am I about to get glinted for Severing? Like, do I have to mull at least 1 of these, maybe 2 of these? Like, what am I thinking? It's spooky, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's correct. I haven't really adjusted it yet, but it is something I've put a lot of thought into. So
Practice.
I don't think I've
I can
changed
say.
anything about it, because like, anyone that glints against you is basically always going to name Fair, Spell, and Severing Winds, but in the Scheherazade matchup, those cards are like just the most important cards in the matchup, so like, there's just no reason. You just can't take that risk and
like,
throwing them away.
if it's not a Scheherazade matchup, right? Like if I'm Lumia OTK against like, you know, Rhea, and I'm like looking at my opening hand with like double Rachel.
Your Scheherazade, or
no, like there's just no Scheherazade in the like table at all, right? Like it's a random rogue black deck versus whatever deck I'm playing. Like when I see multiple cards in my hand, like duplicates, I'm like, okay, what card are they gonna call when they play Glint? And I know they play for Glint. Like what cards do I not want to like stack multiples of, stuff like that? Because I was playing the Lumia OTK and I was playing against, you know, Rhea with 4 Glint. I was playing against, and Rhea's even scared because I have Remnant Glint. But like Scarlet played 4 Glint, and I'm just like, can I afford to keep like 2 Fair Spell?
Is Blind Glint more popular than I'm giving it credit for? Like,
So
I mean,
depending
it's the
on
only
your
discard
deck,
they play 4 of.
right, but
like depending on your deck, if you're able to flash it back, there are times where simply you will you can look at the way the game is likely to progress and realize that you're not going to be able to cast all the glints if you save them till they're not blind. Like I did that this weekend. I was playing and I was like, oh,
no,
this hand lines out, I don't cast my first glint until turn 4 turn 4 or 5 at the earliest, and by then I've started to accrue mystery counters, and I'm going to be able to flash it back even if I blind cast at turn 1.
Yeah, sorry, I must have I misspoke here. I didn't mean like straight blind glint. I meant like turn 1 blind glint. Like,
because
this is what we're talking about here. Because like,
so kind of
in that case, it doesn't matter because you're gonna draw 4 cards that you don't have control over mulliganing by then anyway.
Maybe that's what we can talk about next week.
Blind.
The theory
we
of
just do a whole segment on blind glints.
absolutely.
just blind glints and discard mentalities and pieces of that nature.
So it's not just blind glint though. It's like they go turn 1 thought control. They see my hand with double severing, and I have no outlet to get these severings out of my hand before they get to play their glint kind of stuff. You know. So it's not even like blind glint for
disaster
severing. It's just the fact that like severing is going to sit in my hand, and once they know it's
like
there, they don't have to.
Why
play
don't we
around
just
it
not
they
play
glint.
Severing Wind because they might glint like at some point you can't just be playing around the fact that there are good counters to certain cards.
But
that
like,
are just
do you
so
suddenly
powerful that you
mull
play them anyway?
like more copy? Like I don't know. Like I said, I haven't adjusted anything personally, but it's like it's on my mind, man. And especially if Scheherazade gets banned,
terrifying.
I think it's a discussion.
See, I feel like I'm over here like talking down on this mentality, like, no, I wouldn't change anything for the random blind glint. But then like in Denver, I'm gonna like have 2 severs and then something against Scheherazade. I'm like mulligan 3 cards. I'm gonna flush out on my severs. My hand's gonna be 4 severs and something else. They're gonna go turn 1 glint, and I'm just gonna sweep up my cards. And...
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh goodness gracious! So
I'll
on that
be as
note of
gracious as I
scooping,
can when it happens, Brandon.
yeah, we'll be there. It's okay. We'll just make sure it happens on stream.
that'll
It's
be
fine.
my bad beats of the story of the month of the week. I'll
I'm
just call it now.
excited.
We'll just make sure that you're on stream when it happens,
Oh
just
my
so we can
goodness,
have
could
like
you
at Providence where we had Otherworld Thought Control, Otherworld Thought Control, Otherworld Thought Control, Otherworld, all in the same chase. It was awesome.
Get to see me be blown out by a blind glint.
Yeah, it was very interesting to see happen. So to move on to our kind of fun topic for this week as we kind of wrap things up, Rhea Cluster has been very interesting in the fact that we have kind of seen a lot of different artists kind of pop up and share their artistic talents for this beautiful cluster. So the question I have for everyone is, what is your favorite card art for specifically Rhea Cluster? And I will go first, and I will have to say, kind of beyond a shadow of a doubt, my favorite artwork for Rhea Cluster is Welser, the Archmage of Fire, the 6-drop Resonator. If you actually see that card full art, that card is gorgeous. And no, this is not influenced in any way, shape, or form by the fact that I have a Welser cosplay currently being made. But like, just the artwork of that card, the details, the level of intricacies in terms of the flames in the background, the crest, like all of it is just like pretty to look at, and I really enjoy that card. So that is my pick, is Welser, the Archmage of Fire.
It's got a lot going on for sure.
Well then, I'll go next. So my favorite in this case is, it's the best representation I've seen so far of sort of, there's a very small subset of Force Will cards that look like, Force Will has this very like Japanese sort of anime style, and there's a very small subset of cards that look like someone took the anime style and like tried to blend in heavy Western influences. Like you'd see this on Dawn to the Earth and stuff. And Sword of Fate, the backside of Twin Blades of Hope and Despair, is fantastic.
That's
like
very good.
it's a beautiful blending of opposing colors. It's a great motif. The card has good action. It has a fun character on it without it just being like that character. Like, I love the art on this card, and it is my biggest sadness for that set that the pre-release mat was not a portrait mode this card all the way up and down.
That's a good one.
That was like one of my heavy considerations. That card's absolutely beautiful.
Yes.
All right. Do I want to go next?
You do want to go
Yeah.
next?
I do. You're right. Ryan, did you want to try to guess mine? You don't really have any basis for it this time.
I've got no idea this one, so I'll save my exceptionally high guess rate for another week.
Mine is the time-spinning witch card, Scarlet's Agony. So this card is absolutely gorgeous. If you haven't seen like the full art of this card, you have Scarlet here. She's like covering her face. She looks like in despair. And then in the mirror behind her is Little Red. But Little Red's like reaching out of the mirror and like wrapping her arm around Scarlet too. And it is kind of like what Frank was talking about, where it's an anime style, but it's just got beautiful coloring. It looks very painted. It looks very Western. There's a beautiful little yellow bird right there, and then butterflies flying around. But then on the full art, you can kind of see that some of the butterflies that are like near Scarlet are on fire and like melting or something. But then there's like
Purple fire,
but
too.
like right. But then like coming from the Little Red side of the mirror, all the birds and butterflies are like flying out. The whole thing is just beautifully painted. It tells us a great story. There's two characters, you can kind of read into the plot of the block through this card. And then like the flavor text really all just ties it together. I think this card is just a gorgeous masterpiece. It's one of my favorite full arts ever.
This is also one of the few cards where I enjoy the flavor text that's two people talking.
Right.
A lot of them
very
get like
brief.
really clunky. This
Right,
one's
right.
nice.
So my favorite art is far and away Earthquake Observer. No, I'm kidding.
Charlie the Mule!
Charlie the Mule, shout out. No, so I had the fortunate experience of getting clapped by a whole lot of Jeanne d'Arc Mad Maiden this weekend, and that is a beautiful card. Absolutely gorgeous full art. Very badass female character with a whole bunch of battle armor on. Like, a lot of the females in this game are very anime, waifu, whatever, you know. But Jeanne d'Arc's just, like, ready to fight, you know. She's got a really cool back tattoo. It just has a very human-looking pose, unlike some of the other, like, characters, I think. And is just geared up and ready to go. The full art looks amazing. I think that this card's art has carried its full art's price over like 2 unplayable formats to now where it's actually playable, and it's still going to be an expensive card. And I think that it's a fan favorite, and also like I got to look at it a lot this weekend on the table, and I'm a big fan.
So there
It's
you
nice
have
to
it.
have
There
something to
are-
look at while you're getting killed.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. It's like, yeah,
I do love me a 7/5
Ooh. Or a 9/7.
Excuse me, a 9/7. Thank you very much. Yeah, so there you have it. There are 4 cards. I picked Welser, the Archmage of Fire. Frank, you picked...
What was the name of the backside? I don't remember the name of the
Sword of Fate. Sword of Fate.
Sword of Fate.
Sword of Fate. Brandon?
Scarlet's Agony.
Scarlet's Agony.
Oh,
and Ryan?
We should say the artist. I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry, I hate to interrupt.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I hate to interrupt.
Yeah,
Mine is by Miko Yamazaki.
Mine is Jeanne d'Arc Mad Maiden by Retro.
Mine is listed as Mad.
I don't know who Welser's artist is, but
I'll find it
I
really
will
quick.
get that to you as fast as I can type the word Welser in here.
perfect. Thank you.
Not if I do it
I'm
first.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it is important.
No,
Shihari
absolutely.
Hidemi.
Shihari Hidemi.
Shirai.
Shirai
I
Hidemi.
horribly butchered that
You tried.
first name.
Shirai Hidemi for Welser, the Archmage of Fire. So let us know what you guys think and what card art from Raya Cluster is your favorite in the comment section down below, as well as always go to the Ruler School Facebook page to participate in the poll and see who can potentially take the crown away from Brandon this week. But until next time, guys, we thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Teacher's Lounge. And as always, this is Jeremy Franklin, DMO73, and I am joined, as always, by Ryan Miles.
Hey!
Brandan Bremont.
Goodbye for now.
And Frank Klosser.
Bye.
We'll see you all next week. Have a good one.